Hello everyone, welcome to another video tutorial in this full stack Flutter development series. In this video we'll be looking at creating our sign out use case, and for this use case we'll be looking to invalidate our tokens since we are using token based authentication. But the issue is that we cannot just invalidate tokens because tokens do not work like that. So what we'll be doing is to blacklist those tokens. So whenever a user signs out, we will blacklist that particular token and then check for that token to ensure that it is not blacklisted whenever the user uses that particular token. And so for that implementation we'll be using Redis, which is an in-memory data store for our server. So for our sign out use case, we'll first create that token store, and I'll create an interface for that, and I'll call it token store. Export default interface token store. So if somewhere in the future we decide to change our Redis implementation to, for example, a database or something like that, we can easily implement that. So inside of our token store we want two methods. We want a save, which will accept the token as a string, and we also want a get to get the token or to see if it is blacklisted, and I'll return a promise here, promise string. So those are the two methods that we'll be using. And so I'll go into my data folder under services and I'll create an implementation of that token store. So I'll say Redis token store for class Redis token store, and this will implement our token store. We have two methods. So there we have those two methods. So I will install Redis from my npm package. So I'll say npm install Redis, and I'll also install the types. So now we have that installed. Inside my constructor, I will say I'll inject that Redis client. So private read only client, and this will be of type Redis client. So there I'll import Redis client from Redis, and inside my token store For save, I'll use the Redis client, so I'll just say this client set, and you pass in a key value pair. So I'm going to use the token as the key, and I'm going to use the token as the value. And then for the get, since Redis is asynchronous in nature and we'll have to use a callback, what I'll do, since I want to avoid using the callback and to use the await syntax, I'm going to use the promisify util. So if I import promisify, and I'm going to import that from util. So now I can say promisify this client, the get method, bind to this client. Now I can say the result is await get async and pass in the token. So now this has to be async. Then I'll return the result or empty strings, since there's a possibility that this method returns null. So if it is null, then I'll return empty string. So this is our Redis token store, and we'll just quickly create our sign up use case, sign out rather, to use this token store. So sign out use case, and inside the constructor, private read only token store. This will be of type token store. So now for our async method execute, which accepts a token, and returns a promise string. So I'm just gonna say token store. Once the user sign out, save the token or add it to the blacklist, then I'll return promise resolve. I'll pass the message successfully signed out. So that is my signed out use case using my token store to blacklist that particular token. So now inside of my entry point controller, I'm going to get my sign out use case, which is of type sign out use case. I'll inject that here. Sign out use case, sign out. So this sign out use case equal sign out use case. And now I'll create my sign out endpoint. So I'll copy, change this to sign out, and in order to sign out, the token is required. So I'm going to get the token from the header, which would be the authorization header. So that will be in request headers authorization. Then I'm going to call the sign out use case, and I'll pass in that token. Pass in that token, and then I'll return here the result. Just say a message saying that it was successful, and for the error I'll keep it as it is. So that is my sign out method in my controller. Now inside my router, I have to pass that method in. I have to inject the sign out use case. So I'll say const sign out use case new sign out use case, and this requires a token store. So I'll pass in the token store here, which will be composed in our composition root. So I token store, and pass in the token store. Again, here inside of our configure, the token store, I token store, and we'll pass that in to our controller. So there we have created our sign out use case and injected that into our controller. We'll just copy this to create our sign out route. Sign out, move all of that, and say from the controller sign out. So there we have our sign out route. But in order to sign out, there must be an authorization header present. There must be a token. So you must pass a token here in order to sign out. So I'm going to create a helper that I'm going to call token validator. This helper will validate the token and will be used by all those endpoints that requires a token to access. So token validator, So this validator class will use the token service token service and also the token store to validate the token store. So I'm gonna create the method validate. This method will be accepting a request object, response object, and also a next function. This will be basically behaving as a middleware. So request response from express also the next function from express. So I'll first check if there is an authorization header present. So I'll access the request object, access the headers, and check the authorization. So and then if the authorization header is not present, then I'm going to return response set the status to 401, which is I think is forbidden JSON, and I'm going to return a message that says authorization header required. So if there's no authorization header, then I'll return an error message. Then if there is an authorization header, I'm going to say if header should be the token, so I'm going to say if this token store, if I decode that token, which is the header, the value, if it is equal to empty string, it means that the token is invalid. So if we look inside of our JWT token service, we can see here, so instead of invalid token, I'm going to return empty string if there's an error. So I'm saying if it is empty, then the token is invalid. Or if the token is valid, and invalid here means it has expired or tampered with. Or I'm going to say await this token store get, again pass it the token. So when I get that, if it is not equal to empty, that means if it returns something from the token store, it means that this token was blacklisted. So if either of these conditions match, then I want to return response status, 403 status, thing which is unauthorized, and the JSON return an error that says invalid token. Otherwise, if everything is right, then next function to execute the request on the controller. So this is my token validator, and inside my auth router I will use that token validator to validate my sign out. So I will pass it in here inside the configure method. I'll say token validator of type token validator. And then here inside my sign out, before the controller, I am going to call that validator method. So I'm going to say token validator validate, and I want it to validate request response next. So pass those in here. So request response next. So there we have our validator as a middleware to ensure that the token is valid before we execute the sign out method. And this middleware will also be used on other endpoints that requires authentication, that requires a valid token to access those secret resources. So now we have our sign out endpoint set up. We can go now inside our compose composition root to add those dependencies here. So inside of our composition root, I want to create our Redis client. So Redis client, which is of type Redis client. And then here, where we initialize our Mongoose client, I'm going to say our Redis client equal to, let us import Redis here. This will equal to Redis create client. This will create a local Redis client and our local host or local server. So now with our Redis client, we need our token store and our validator setup. So token store equal new Redis token store, pass in the client and our token validator equal new token validator. This uses the token service and the token store. Now we pass in our token store and our token validator. So there we have it. But in order for this to work, we'll have to install Redis on our local machine. So to install it is quite simple. So here in my terminal, if you are using a Mac like myself and you have Homebrew installed, you can use Homebrew. Say brew install Redis. Since I already have it installed, there's no need for me to install it. But after you have installed it, again, if you're using the Mac, then you need to run brew services start Redis in order to start the Redis server. If you are not using a Mac, you can go to redis.io. You can go to the download section and you can download the one that is related to your operating system. So you can go here and figure out how to download it and install it on your particular system. But once you have it installed, then we should be okay to go ahead and run our server using npm run dev, and also to test it using Postman. So here inside of Postman, I am going to sign in using an existing user. That should return me a token. So here is the token. Then I am going to use this token, and here inside of sign out, if I execute sign out without a token, then I should get an error. Authorization header is required. That is our middleware there at work, our token validator. This is an invalid token I have here. So if I run this, it should say invalid token. If I enter the token that just created since I signed in, then it should say sign out successfully. So now this token is added to our Redis data store as being blacklisted. So now if I run this again, then it should say invalid token. So we have our sign out working as it should. And if I should, inside my terminal, if I should say Redis CLI keys, then you should see that the token is here, is written to our Redis data store. So that is working as it should. So we have set up our sign out use case, and we have blacklisted the token using Redis, which is a local data store. So thank you guys for watching this video, and see you in the next one, where we'll be moving back into our Flutter code so that we can call these endpoints and create our authentication screen in Flutter. The code is also on GitHub if you want to view it from there. So see you in the next one.